Okay. Hello. Welcoming Ben Kreshtool, our ritual director, to this week's Parsha discussion. Rabbi Saroken, got Jeremy behind the glass, and we have a difficult Parsha to parse out today.
You could definitely call it that.
Obscure, filled with arcane laws.
I think they're so arcane. I think still relevant.
Still relevant.
Still relevant.
All these years later.
All these years later.
These thousands of years later.
So I actually don't think it's funny that you say that. I don't think it's difficult. I almost feel like this is where we should start the Torah. I know that's
Really?
a radical idea. Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because people are sometimes dubious about the relevance of Judaism, Torah, all of that stuff in our lives today. And I feel like right now, what this Parsha of Mishpatim really teaches us is that like Torah, God, Mitzvot, that they actually have something to say to help us like navigate all of these like areas of our lives that are, big and small, things that we sometimes think that like our gut will lead us to the right place. And yet like oftentimes we need guidance to get us to sort of to a more right place, if you will. And so I think in some ways, like this parsha actually, it tells us like actually the way that you take care of people, the way that you do your work, the way that you pay the person who comes to clean your house, the way that or you don't, the way that you sort of, if you choose to leave a hole in your yard and someone falls on it, falls in it, like who's responsible? The way that if you find a lost object or you see someone's animal and you decide that, it's like everything, I feel like. I think what makes it hard to your earlier point, Rabbi Schwartz, is that like it's a quick succession. It doesn't really like take the time to like flesh out the laws. It's like la, 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 la. So it just feels like you're sort of like on this whirlwind tour. But I actually do feel like this is where Torah becomes really real.
I think also the like succession of laws in rapid order also invites us to explore deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So you get sort of that like overview, and then the rest of Jewish literature allows us to dive deeper into that. And our rabbis were really concerned with all aspects of life, like every aspect.
Yeah.
And I agree that that's like this is where that sort of compass comes from. Mishpatim.
It's an interesting thing. I was recently reading with Maya, Jonathan Haidt's book. I think it's pronounced Haidt. It's a Haidt, but it's Haidt. I don't know if you guys have been reading him. He wrote two books. One is The Coddling American Mind, and the other is The Anxious Generation. And they're both really, I feel like they're sort of important reads in this age that we live in, where the majority of our younger generation, are challenged by anxiety and different things. But one of the things that he talks about in that book is that like one of the great untruths of today is that like, if you listen to your like, that quiet voice inside of you, like it will always guide you to the right place. And I actually think that in some ways that's not actually true. It will guide you to the place that you think is right, but it's not necessarily. And so that's where I feel like it's like the beautiful gift of like Torah gives us a moral compass and like an ethical way that we might not get to without this sort of wisdom.
For sure.
No, of course. I mean, I always say like the Torah doesn't have to create a law around an issue that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, just from last week's Parsha, the Torah wouldn't have to contain in the 10 Commandments, lo tirtzach, don't kill. If people didn't kill each other, if no one ever killed anyone else, you wouldn't be in the Torah. Like there would be no problem. So yeah, of course, why all these issues in terms of how other people seeing an opportunity might not treat the other person the right way, steal a little something from them, not return something because that's what people do. So the Torah has to come in and say, I think I'm always amazed actually at the Torah's sort of profound understanding of human psychology.
Mm-hmm.
and it does, it comes in because those are the things that's where we go wrong, for sure, that's where we go wrong.
So when you think about all of the mitzvot in here, and I actually think even the word mitzvah or mitzvot in plural is a really interesting thing, because oftentimes it's sort of mistranslated as like a good deed, but the truth is it's really a commandment from God that guides us. But when you think of all of the mitzvot in here, what are a few of the ones that you feel like this one, always speaks to me, or I feel like it should be amplified in the world that we're living in?
Oh, I know Ben's favorite.
Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live.
Oh, why do you like that?
Witchcraft is, I think, a big scourge on society. I say it a little tongue-in-cheek, but I think there's an element of truth to people's desire to remove God from the equation and put their lot into something else that isn't correct. It's not real. It's false. Mm-hmm. And that's like along the same lines as idolatry. And we can talk about like actual honest to God idols, but also I think in today's society, idolatry takes a different sort of form. But people worship all sorts of things today that aren't God, and I think that's bad. And so witchcraft, I think, is I say it jokingly, but there's a little bit of truth there to really put the focus where it belongs. For me, that's one anyway.
How about you?
I'm just thinking about the crazy 8-ball, the magic 8
My
ball.
magic 18 ball. It says hi on it, right? It's great. I do use it to make significant decisions here at work.
But that's more like the Urim and Tumim.
Yeah,
right?
It's yeah, right. It's a little bit.
Explain that a little bit.
The Urim and Tumim. Yeah, right. So Urim and Tumim were this oracular device, we would call it, that gets put behind the choshen, behind the breastplate of the high priest. And it would be consulted by the king in Israel and by the people when really important decisions were made about war, about taxes, about all things that were important to the nation. They would turn to the Urim and the Tumim, and through it, God would reveal the correct answer. So yes, I use the magic 18 ball as a sort of Urim and Tumim sometimes.
I think that's hanging in my closet in my office somewhere. Like on a hanger, I think it's a
thing.
Well, interestingly about that, though, the sense of it is that it worked as a yes or no device.
Right.
It's not like you could say, could you plot a course of action?
Right.
It's
rather, should we go to war?
Right. It's not ChatGPT. It's like, should we do this or should we do that?
Right.
Yes or no.
Right. And Magic 18 Ball also is similarly. But the Magic 18 Ball is distinctly Jewish in that it gives mostly passive-aggressive answers. So you have to be a little careful with it sometimes.
It's interesting. Last night, I had Mason Hun and his mom, Marcy, came over last night at like 8:30 to do his Parsha.
Right, Bar Mitzvah coming up.
Yeah, Pikud Day. And when we were talking about the accounting for the Mishkan, which, by the way, we'll get to.
That's my jam.
Later. We were talking about that, and I was talking about how, like, Moshe and the others that were involved with the sort of the accounting of all of the objects that were gifted to the Mishkan endeavor, that, that we learned that when they were counting things up, they didn't wear any clothing with pockets, and they wore sandals. And all of this so that they couldn't be accused of, skimming from the top. And I think to your point earlier, there's this really important, I don't know. I feel like when you said that you're impressed by the Torah's, sort of
sense of human
psychology, but I feel like in some ways, like, the Torah thinks, through God, like, thinks of things that we don't even think of. We might not even think of, like this here. I mean, one of my mitzvot that always jumps out at me is 23:4. When you encounter your enemy's ox or donkey wandering, you must take it back to him. And and then actually even further, and then another, when you see the donkey of your enemy trying, lying under its burden and would refrain from raising it, you must nevertheless raise it with him. And I love these in particular because, well, first of all, like, even though I don't really see I don't see donkeys wandering through, on Starburst Lane or Park High.
I gotta go downtown to the Arabers.
Deer, yes, but not donkeys. But I feel like it's so interesting because when you brought in that category, right? Like when you see something that belongs to another person that, something that person cares about, you have a responsibility. But I love that the Torah uses like the enemy.
Yeah.
Right? Like even it's one thing to do it for a friend or like a good enough neighbor, but someone that you actually can't stand or who's can't stand you or you have a bad relationship, even that person, like, right? You have responsibility.
But that's human psychology.
Yeah.
So my analogy with that, mitzvah, I love that mitzvah too, is you're driving down Reisterstown Road and you see like off on the side of the road, there's someone that you really don't like and they have a flat tire.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And do you say to yourself, and you're like, yes. Or do you say, I know it says in the Torah that when my enemy, person that I don't like, is having tsuras, like I also have to take care of that too and pull over and help the person. So again, that sense of like how tempted we are, by the voices in our heads that pull us in the wrong direction. And the Torah, I think, like to your point earlier, comes along as a corrective. The other thing I think in Mishpatim is, there's this sort of general tension in the Torah, and I think it plays out in Jewish life as you move forward in terms of like a sense of a responsibility Jewishly, particularly versus universalistically. Right?
Yes.
And I think Mishpatim is very universally oriented. These are mitzvot that apply like regardless of whom you're dealing with, what kind of situation it is. It's not only about the way Jews relate to other Jews. It's about the way Jews are supposed to relate to everyone.
As ben Adam le'Adam.
Ben Adam
Right,
le'Adam.
from people to people.
Yeah.
I think to your point, a little earlier on, you see sort of laws of lending and payment.
Yeah.
And I think definitely to your point, it says, if you lend money to my people, right? If you lend money to another Jew, to the poorer among you, do not act as a creditor and don't take interest.
Yeah.
And I think that like that to your point, but it also, the implication is that these are applicable even wider than just the Jewish people.
Right.
And it says next, if you take your neighbor's garment in pledge, you must return it to him before the sunset. It might be his only clothing and the only covering he has for his skin. And if he cries out to me, I'm going to pay attention because I am compassionate. Like I think in so many ways, just even the idea of like you need to pay the people that, are day workers for you. Like that day, it's so easy. I just remember like when my kids were young and we had babysitters, like just not having cash. And it's so easy to be like, can I give it to you next time?
Uh-huh.
And just the Torah in the back of your head being like, actually, no. And even if they say that's fine, you actually, and this was before Venmo and all of those other like
Right.
payment tools, but just this idea, the Torah, like in your head, like the Torah says no. Like, what if they don't have enough? What if they needed that money?
Right.
If they were relying on it to get dinner tonight or whatever it is? And,
Torah always is keeping its eye on the marginalized, the underprivileged, the the ger. Like it's always sort of right in the Torah's vision, like keeping its eye on that. And I think I often think of the Torah as on the one hand like being in the weeds. Mishpatim's very in the weeds. It's all these details. But then when you step back, and what is the overall arc?
Right,
where is it trying to go, and where is it trying to bring us?
And I think what also is interesting about sort of being in the weeds there and all of these mitzvot relating to ben Adam le'Adam, people and other people, that our covenant with God requires us to deal justly with other people and not just with God, right? It's not just a covenant with God alone. Our covenant with God is contingent upon us being compassionate people to the marginalized and to other people in our community. And that's, I think, very profound and I think also kind of unique to Judaism in a way. You have, especially in the ancient Near East, where, the relationship with people that they had with their gods was between them and their gods only and didn't really think about the rest of the community as a whole. Interesting.
Right. So along those lines, that is one thing that becomes unique in terms of early Israelite religious development, in the sense of like some of these laws are lifted right out of the Hammurabi Code. It's literally like like almost word for word for word. So it's not like the ancient Israelites invented these laws. Some of them yes, some of them no. There was like a common ancient Near Eastern approach to law and how a society should run. What the ancient Israelites did, though, to Ben's point, is say, not these are the laws, but God wants these laws to be observed by a covenantal community, and that was a break. Like that was a new idea.
It's an interesting thing. I think in some ways it's countercultural. Just this idea of the we being of primary importance and overshadowing the individual.
Today it's countercultural.
Yeah,
Today
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Then now, but we were reading in our guys group. I think it was a week or two ago. We finished the book, The Genius of Israel, and it was a spectacular read. Actually, it was Dan Senior and his brother Saul Singer who wrote it, and one of the things that it was talking about is this idea of like, how do you get to this place of really prioritizing the collective and the we? How do you get to a place, when we bury people sometimes of that great generation, we always say, like, we almost don't even need to talk to their loved ones.
Right.
We sort of just already know.
Right.
They're going to be self-sacrificing. They're going to
hardworking.
have
family
integrity,
oriented,
honesty, patriotism, all of those
values.
things.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, like one of the things that the book really gets to in The Genius of Israel is that it's sort of like baked into Israeli society that that focus on the collective and that you are a part of something bigger, and I feel like Mishpatim can help us, but I think one of the challenges is today, we've sort of lost this space for teaching morality in our world, right? Like it used to be when our country was founded, it was sort of baked into the curriculum of our schools and our after school programs and everything else, where you learned how to be a good neighbor and a good friend and a good citizen of the world. And I think nowadays, there's a lot more of like, well, if it feels good for you or if it feels right for you, then that's all that matters.
Yeah. That's part of living in the postmodern age, when everything is being true. Is there such thing as absolute truth or not absolute truth? I mean, that's a challenge that postmodernity, I think, is presenting to all of us. So I've been being told from the very strict timekeeper behind the glass, he's doing this, which means either a hurricane is coming or
start the helicopter.
Or it's time to. But so very briefly, and we have this odd story at the end of the Parsha.
I was hoping you weren't going to mention it.
I was also wondering what your favorite mitzvah was in here.
Yeah,
not favorite, but like something that you.
I like the one return. Help your enemy. I like that one. Yeah. But the story is a very odd story about, this sort of almost like a hallucinogenic experience.
It does kind of read like that.
Where Moses goes up but brings the elders with them, and then they have this weird visual experience, and then they share this meal with God. At least that's the way the Torah describes that.
And the pavement is sapphire.
I've
always imagined that like very beautiful.
Yeah, me too.
all this weird stuff. So any quick takes on that?
Yeah, I think it's, after this recitation of laws, it's the sort of sealing of the deal, right? The elders and the Moses with the priests and everybody up there is
ratification.
The ratification of the deal, right? We've all had all these laws. We're going to agree to do them, and we're going to do that by eating together, because that's sort of how in the ancient Near East you sealed a deal, by food, right? And that's the same sort of thing back in Bereshit with the stew, right? The lentil stew. Give me your birthright. We're going to seal the deal with the soup, with the food, right? And so it's that's what I get out of it. I think it's definitely reads hallucinogenic, though, for sure.
Definitely, they had gefilte fish at this meal. They had. It was like
such a bad joke.
No, I bet maybe it was gefilte fish is mamish misinai.
Gefilte fish.
Rabbi Saroken does not eat gefilte fish.
I understand.
No, wait, I do. I eat the roll, not the.
Oh, the loaf. The loaf. Yeah.
You know what I mean.
You eat some gefilte fish.
I do, just the roll.
The loaf.
Not
I'm really.
Not from the jar.
I know.
Wow.
It's a thing.
It
might be my only Jewish food that I eat.
That That's something.
I know it is something. Yeah. So I'll also just add to that at the end of Exodus, we also see after the Mishkan is created that there's another like celebration or another meal that's had. And I think in some ways, like for me, my takeaway like this week from that is that like life can be hard and it can be messy, but it's really important sometimes to take the time to just,
Eat
find
gefilte
joy
fish.
and
Find joy and eat
hopefully,
food with
like,
people that you
lunch
love.
and broil or steak.
Yeah.
But find a little bit of joy in the things that you can.
With the people you love.
Amen.
Yeah, nice. Last thing I would say, just wrapping it up, is I always also think of Mishpatim as working us back into the day to day. Like your Sinai, last week. Wow, such a big moment, and then. But that's not going to happen every day.
Well, there's a calendar in
Yeah.
there. There's a recitation of the calendar in Mishpatim, which does put us back into that cycle.
Every day, you need Judaism every day. It's not just Yontif. It's not just Shabbos or whatever. It has to be every single day.
And I think the other part to like notice at Mishpatim is that like there's a shift in the narrative.
Yep.
And it sort of marks that place where we go from these.
Or no narrative almost at this point. Yeah.
It becomes a little harder to preach.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of stuff towards the end of Exodus, in my opinion.
Agree. It's all good.
All right. Oh, now we're really getting. Now we're
Helicopters here.
helicopters.
Shabbat
here.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.